Hey, it's Paul Banis with GreatDad.com, and I'm here with my weekly series talking to dads about all different type of subjects. And I've got maybe the different type thing. I have seems like every week I'm saying we've got a different spin on it. So maybe I'm putting a lot of diversity in this podcast. But I've got Philip Sessions with me today, who's an expert on communications, and he does communications training for adults. But we're going to be talking a little bit more about the dad aspect. So welcome, Philip.
Hey, glad to be here, Paul.
So you've got little kids, like little kids. So we talked a little bit beforehand about just the fact that you're even now thinking like you do. And as soon as you have kids, your worldview changes a lot. Could you
Yeah.
just talk a little bit maybe about the importance of developing those communication skills from all the way from little kids all the way to older adults?
Communication skills is everything. I really believe that's 95+% of our issues as adults, as children. And my own personal experience was because I wasn't a communicator growing up. I was that introverted kid, wouldn't talk at all. Actually, in third grade, I missed a day of school. And the teacher, I came back the next day asking what I missed. She had no clue I missed.
Oh,
So the
wow.
teacher, and I still don't know this day if she actually really meant that or was joking or what, but she never followed that up with anything. So I take that because I was so quiet, even the teacher didn't notice me. So right there, if your child is not speaking at all or very little,
Yeah.
they're going to get passed up for opportunities. And that's what I found to be one of the most beneficial things is because I learned how to speak and communicate, more opportunities came for me. And so that's why I believe communication is such an important thing outside of the aspect of it helps you solve problems. It helps you be able to get somewhere a lot easier versus just saying, hey, we need to do this. Well, why? There's all these questions that are going to come back because you don't communicate properly.
Right.
So it's so important.
And when you say communication, I mean, you're a speaking expert and coach, but we're talking about everything from communication with your partner, with your kids, with your friends, all the way through presenting in front of a large audience.
Yeah, exactly. I primarily focus on helping you get ready for some kind of media, whether it be podcast, on a stage, going to a TV show, whatever it is. But yes, communication, what we're talking about here is life. Anything that you and I having conversation here, me talking to multiple people, you talking to multiple people, whatever it is, you're trying to communicate a thought that's in your head and give it to somebody else who doesn't have all that information that's here in your head, all that context that we have. A lot of times we just start talking without it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm talking about here. And I believe we're going to come into this conversation really talking about is how to communicate those things that are going on in your head in an effective manner that you don't have to then come back 3 times and say, oh, well, okay, let me give you some more details on that so you understand. Just here, clear, cut, and concise, where we can start making decisions from there
So
on one try.
is there a difference in your mind between the communication skills like you and me one on one versus if we're in front of a big group of 100 people? Are there any, I mean, other than the obvious, are there any fundamental differences in how that communication style works?
Not too much. One on one, you can really cater it to the person that you're literally talking to because you
Right.
hopefully know who they are. And if you don't, you do make some assumptions, but you can also start to ask questions to really get to know them. Like I see books in your background. So I could ask you, like, hey, what kind of books do you read? And start to get to know, okay, if it's business books, you're probably business oriented. If it's leadership books, you probably like to talk about leadership. And then we can start to have a conversation from there. But when I'm in a larger crowd or multiple people that I can't just have this one-on-one conversation with, then I have to know the environment that I'm in rather than the people that I'm talking to. You can make some assumptions again about the people you're talking to, but based on that environment. So if I'm going into an elementary school, probably gonna be a lot of kids. So I'm gonna talk on a kid level versus if I go to a university and depending on what classroom I go into, I'm going to talk differently. An engineering class is going to be different than a business class, but still, I know those are adults. They're educated in some way, shape, or form. And so I'm going to talk to them differently than I would the kids. So it's more you look at the environment and make some assumptions based on that versus you look at the person and with the environment as well, and you can really cater to that individual on one-on-one versus the group.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it always gets back to that same thing. Know your audience, whether it's an
Yeah.
audience of one or an audience of a lot. It makes me think of like people who do public speaking and ask a lot of questions, like how many of the audience do this, or clap your hands if you think this, and I guess they're trying to get interaction to maybe feed off that energy, but they're also trying to gain information of how much to push that angle if they can do this extemporaneously or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Then with that, yeah, that's kind of neuro linguistics programming or NLP. So you're getting feedback. So you're getting questions, answers. So, okay, is this going to be something that I need to go towards? Or, okay, maybe I need to steer away from that. If I start talking about accounting, who here is in accounting? Nobody raises their hands. Okay, I'm not going to talk about bookkeeping.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
but if they're in engineering, okay, let's talk numbers. Let's really get into those details. But if they're in business, we're going to stay more high level or leadership, something like that. So yeah, you're able to gauge that. But then also because of this interaction or raising your hand, oh yeah, me, whatever it is, you're getting that buy-in and you're getting people actually absorbed into your speech as well. So it's really good for both those aspects, engaging and engaging that audience, gauging who they are, what they want to learn about, but also engaging them so they're involved in your speech versus just hearing a talking person on stage, a statue, if you will.
right, right. So if we bring this down to the family level, which is probably going to be the bulk of our conversation, when we're talking to our partner or our kids, is there a difference between learning how to communicate versus emotional intelligence and all those kind of, the kind of buzzwords right now that are like basic communication? Maybe I'm answering my own question, but those are kind of basic ability to understand, have empathy, dial into the person you're talking to, or is there something else about communication that would differentiate what you would teach?
No, I would say that they're both basically the same. With an adult, and I'm probably going to say this more from a perspective of being the husband to my wife and everything, but still, you're going to gauge that situation based on how they're reacting at that time, how you're going to push back. And on top of that, is this something that I want to die on? Is this a sword that I'm going to fall on this situation? Or is this something that, it's not that big of a deal to me? And that's how you can start to direct that conversation and go in with that. Because there's plenty of times where me and my wife are arguing about something and I'm not always the best at it, but I try and step back real quick and say, is this something that's really worth me dying on? Is
Yeah,
this something that's important to her? I got to look at both sides of that. Is it important to me? Is it important to her? Why is she acting this way? Is there something else going on? And so, really trying to take in all these different things and then addressing that situation from there. And so, really looking at that. But then from the kid's side, there's times where, yes, you need to be firm on that decision and hold to it, and there's other times that, hey, you kind of got to give in. Right now, with the younger generation, or for me, sometimes, look, here's the phone. Like sometimes you just give in. And is that the best parenting? Maybe not. But if I'm giving it to them all the time, that's definitely not a good thing. So you have to really look at the situation and assess kind of what's been going on. And a lot of times with our daughter or our older one, with giving her the phone or letting her watch something on YouTube or whatever,
right.
it's based on how much screen time she's already had. So if she hasn't had any, okay, you know what, she's getting a little rowdy or whatever, and we need to take care of some things and be able to focus and let her be able to just kind of sit there and do nothing, if you will. We'll put something on. We try to make it more wholesome, like Miss Rachel or something like that, where she's learning and being engaged in everything. But we go based on how much time she's had there. So really just taking awareness of that situation and being self-aware of yourself and the person that you're speaking to. But obviously with children, a little bit less self-awareness that they have on their end.
Yeah.
And it's more about you just being firm and having that discipline versus the spouse. You're not going to necessarily have that discipline on them per se, like you do the kid.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you said something really important. One of the most important things that a lot of us learn as coaches is that ability to differentiate between what is important and what is not. And quite often, as partners, we let everything trigger us, and we will we'll put everything in the same box of, I can't deal with this right now. Whereas if you can center yourself and count to 10 or whatever technique you use to kind of calm down that little thing, like the dishes in the dishwasher, whatever the problem
Mhm.
is, that goes away if you can kind of lessen it. Okay, so when we talk about kids and preparing them for this, what I would imagine you say is kind of a life skill
Mhm.
is the ability to communicate, whether it's to a small group or a large group. When do you start to help them, or what are the initial steps that you would advise people to think of and to get them motivated to think that way or think that's valuable?
Are you talking about as far as like communication?
Communications or the desire to break out. Like you said, you were an introvert. Sometimes introverts don't ever never break out of that. And then just always for the rest of their lives, they avoid any kind of situation where they'll have to talk to more than one or two people at a time. And they
Mm.
miss out, like you say, on a lot of the opportunities. So
Yeah.
how do you push them out of their comfort zone to start to think that it's worth taking that risk?
So I think the younger you can start, the better, because as children, and not all of them, but most of them are very curious. And if you're constantly saying, no, don't do that, no, don't do that. Oh, we can't do that. And you're constantly beating down metaphorically that curiosity, eventually they're going to stop being curious. And that's what actually, to me, breeds that outgoingness, breeds them wanting to actually do something. And that's my plan. My oldest daughter right now, she'll just talk to anybody. We went to a restaurant the other
Yeah.
day. She's like, hey, like the lady was sitting on the
Yeah.
bench. Hey, we didn't prompt her, anything like that.
Naturally extroverted. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted, yeah, natural extrovert. And so I'm just trying to feed that because I realize that if she's already doing it, she can continue to do that. And she's going to go so much further that way. So really just feeding that curiosity anytime that they're curious about something, as long as it's decent and everything like that, nothing too crazy out there. But really just feeding that curiosity is the first thing that I would do. Second thing is just putting them in environments that makes that happen. For me, as that introvert, I finally had a shift that I wanted to make a change. So for me, I had this desire to change and I just started feeding that. And anytime I feel like I just don't really want to do it, I always think to myself, you know what? You're going to be better off on the other side when you just do this. So just go ahead and do it. You know, you're going to be kicking yourself in the tail if you don't do it. So just do it. And so taking that back to the children, we need to not push them so much, but lead them and kind of pull them a little bit to start doing those things, to start thinking about that and really kind of critically thinking for themselves rather than giving it to them. And I'll go back again to my daughter, trying to teach her how to do things. Like she had a stuffed animal in her crib and she, Daddy, can you get it? And I showed her like, hey, look, put your arm in here, because she would get it up to the top of the crib, but there's a bar at the top. She couldn't get it over. I'm like, look, reach over
Yeah,
and
right.
grab it. And then she did it one time. She's like, oh, and then another time stuffed animals in there. I was like, and she's like, Daddy, can you get it? I was like, you can get it. And she reached in there, got to the top, brought the other arm over. I didn't even tell her to do it. She just did it on her own. She learned so quickly. But I could have easily just been like, oh yeah, let me get it for you. And it's a silly thing, but it's that same thing where you try and teach them how to do it so they can do it for themselves. The whole metaphor of, give somebody a fish or teach them how to fish
Right, right,
thing.
right. Do you think it is a matter of introversion versus extroversion? Because I consider myself an introvert, but I quite often am the first one to give a toast at a party, or I try to jump into public speaking opportunities. I've taken Toastmasters a whole bunch of times. And that what doesn't mean that I was always comfortable in all those situations, but I didn't let my introversion get in the way of at least situational extroversion.
Yeah. I think it really comes down to you realizing what the outcome is of that and thinking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
what's
yeah.
on the other side of that. Another good example, especially for us, when we were single or young and everything, you didn't want to go talk to that girl because you were afraid of the rejection.
Right.
But guess what? If you didn't talk to her
Yeah.
or you talked to her and she rejected you, you're in the same spot. You're still single.
Right.
But at least when you went to talk to her, you knew whether she was into you or not. And the cool thing is, she could have said yes, and now you've got a date, or now
Right.
you've at least got a number and a
Right.
chance at going on a date, kind of thing. And so that's how I would say look at it. Don't look at the negative side to it. Oh, what are people going to think about me? No, think about what's the positive outcome that could come of that. People are going to be thankful that I got up to speak, because you probably had this a lot of times, Paul, where you went up and spoke, and all of a sudden other people started
Yeah,
speaking,
yeah,
or
yeah.
they were willing to say something
Right.
because you were that first person. Just
Right.
like the school dance, the middle school dance, where one couple finally decided to go out there and dance on the floor, and now
Right.
everybody else goes. Somebody has to start. So why not let it be you?
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's the way I try and look at it. And so that's my plan with my daughters, is start to get them to think about like, hey, what can I do to push myself out of this comfort zone? What can I do to kind of fail forward kind of thing, or at least try it and
Mm.
realize, did I like it or not? Do I want to do it again or not? And just kind of go along with that same thing throughout all their life, as long as I'm able to have them at the house and everything.
Yeah, I talked to a lot of experts about the idea of of presenting small challenges when they're little, so that they can increase, so you can increase those challenges, whatever that type of thing is. And I wonder if, the act of saying grace before a meal, or in our house it was expressing something we're grateful for, but having them speak in those situations where maybe it's just, 3 or 4 of you around the dinner table, but that turns into 12 people at Thanksgiving or whatever. And you're giving them progressively these challenges that you kind of have in mind that they're going to, wildly succeed at, so that they get used to that idea and they don't see it as an opportunity for failure, but a potential for success.
Yeah, I think that's a great way. And another thing just popped in my head. If they're really wanting something, if you really want to really push the limits here, and maybe you've already done some of this stuff first, don't just randomly say, okay, you're going to make a presentation for me and pitch me about why you need this thing, or
Oh, I love
why
that. I
you
love that.
getting this thing. Like,
Yeah.
but that's an awesome idea that now I need to write that down somewhere for my kids in the future. Like, hey, if you really want this, come pitch me on
Yeah.
this, or hey, you got to do some kind of work, some kind of action. And that would be a great way, because leaders are great communicators. And if you want to be a leader, you got to be able to communicate better and
Yeah.
communicate why you need this thing. And that's what I feel like most people struggle with, is the why behind needing something. They say, oh, I need this.
Right.
That's kind of it. Well, in the corporate world, management's not just going to give you something. Oh yeah, it's $100,000. Like, yeah, go ahead and spend it. Go ahead and get it.
Right.
No, why? What's the justification behind it? So if I can help them justify this thing, even if it's something silly like a game or a stuffed animal or whatever, still give me something. At least they can start to learn how to present better and articulate their message. And that's the biggest thing to me. Just learn how to articulate their thoughts in a cohesive manner.
Yeah, and then you're not rewarding the bad behavior like the whining and the
Yeah.
complaining. You're rewarding the logical thought, the presentation of the ideas, the rational approach. I like that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And then also as well, I think it's an instant gratification world, and Amazon, where we just get everything next day delivery. There's
Wow.
nothing that you have to really do in order to receive. And again, it depends on where their age and maturity levels at as children. But if you make them even do something simple as presenting about why they need this, instead of saying, "Daddy, I want this." Okay, here you go, honey. Now they feel like they worked for it. And that's something, as we get into life, we have to work for things in order to be able to get them. We can't just go spend $10,000 just because we want to spend it. We've got to work to make that $10,000. And
Yeah.
so for some people that may be $100, or it could be 100,000 for those that are really successful in as far as financials go. But wherever that limit is at, or that monetary limit is at, that may be your threshold or whatever, but you still have to work towards it in order to get something. And that's tough to say what's that exact age. I would say once they start to really understand things, or probably in grade school at least, that's where you really want to start doing that, because then it teaches them, I have to work for things that I get. I don't just get everything. Okay, Christmas, birthdays, special occasions, that's one thing. I'm not saying every time they need to work for it,
Right.
but have them actually starting to do something, work a little bit, instead of just giving it to them just because they asked for it. And that
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
that creates spoiledness and selfishness and all sorts of things.
Yeah, well, a little bit of feel far afield from the communication aspect, but I think that's a really important point. Is controlling that impulse, or creating the impulse control,
Mhm.
and the delayed gratification is a huge benefit for the kids. Is like, even if you're going to give them, like you say, the stuffed animal, and you want to give it to them today because we love seeing those smiles on their kids'
Yes.
faces. And sometimes it's also us not giving into our immediate impulse to, be the hero of the day. But even
Mhm.
having them wait 24 hours, or in the case of a small child, an hour, is really going a lot further in developing that ability, not whine and think you can get everything immediately, or developing a mindset where your expectations far exceed reality.
Yeah. And another thing with that too, I've heard like, I mean, it can be different things. Let's say like a snack. And I forget, I've heard on some podcasts or some video on social media, but it's like, hey, you can have, let's say, one Oreo right now, or if you wait 24 hours, I'll
Right.
give you four Oreos,
Yeah. The
and see
famous
what they
marshmallow
do.
test. Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, they can get that immediate reward, but hey, you're going to get four times the reward if you wait 24 hours or whatever time frame you want to
Yeah.
put on that. But if they wait that long, then they real that starts to also build that discipline to realize, like, hey, if I put in the effort, if I put in the time, I'm going to get a greater reward. Because in life, things hardly ever come to us when we want them, when we hope they come to us. It takes much longer than that. So if you can start to build that discipline as well within kids, and again, I know we're going way off communication, but build that discipline. Again, it goes back to discipline, building that in them, that will help them in the long run as
Yeah.
well. Not just the communication, but the discipline. I think with children, I mean, communication is very important, but discipline is also another important thing. And you got to tell I get excited about that as well, talking through that, because that's the plan that I have for my kids, because I don't want to have them spoiled. Like, I plan to spoil them, don't get me
Right,
wrong,
right,
but
right,
I want to
right.
make sure they're not spoiled rotten.
Right, 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 right. So when they get it, then they start getting into middle school, high school, and they, let's say you've got an extrovert who's always screaming out the answer, and unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, that's quite often what is rewarded in school, even if the things are stupid. Even this, at least in our experience, the stupid answers are far better than the kid who's quiet and has all the answers but never says them. But how do you
Mhm.
get them? Or are there ways to get? Maybe it's the same thing as is for a middle schooler, is explaining the value of this skill rationally, or are there other strategies for getting a younger child to, or starting it to be an older child oriented toward this?
I would start asking them questions about, how do you feel about these kids? Because I think about back to the days when I was in grade school and everything. It always seemed that the outgoing guys are the ones that got the girls, that were funny, that people wanted to be around.
Right.
And while I was the good kid, I did everything right and everything. People didn't really care to be around me that much. I mean, they didn't like dislike me, but they weren't just like, oh, Philip, like, let's hang out with Philip. It was always somebody else that was more extroverted. So really having them, hey, what are those people that you like, or kind of look at and kind of wish you were a little bit more like, and
Mm,
see if those things kind of come out. Well, I wish I was like Cody, who always speaks up, or who's always just, really outgoing and really talkative, and everybody seems to like him. Like, I wish I was more like that.
yeah.
And there's obviously that other side to it too, where, well, you don't want to just be like everybody else or whatever. You need to be your own person. But if they start to give those indications that they wish they were more outgoing, then okay, well, hey, what do you think are some things that you could do to start being more outgoing, and have them really think of these ideas? Well, maybe I could start talking to people at the grocery store, or maybe I can do this, maybe I can do that. But just helping them understand and to find opportunities to start speaking, because we all know when we do something more and more, we get better and better
Right.
at it. So you just have to get them open to start being better at it, and realizing that it's not that big of a deal if they do fail, or if they say something stupid, especially if they go to a grocery store and try and have a conversation with a random stranger. They're gonna fail at first. It's gonna be awkward, but especially when they're younger, the stranger is gonna be more willing to talk to them, and they're gonna realize that, hey, people are actually more friendly and willing to talk. And then that's just gonna be something that's in their brain
Yeah.
now. But if you started as let's say a 70-year-old, just go on the other end of the spectrum. If you're at 70 years old and start trying to do that, it's like, "Oh, what's this old person talking to me for?" Well, maybe 70 is not good. Maybe 50s, because they're still, 70. You get kind of that age. Oh, they don't care anymore. They're just going to talk to whoever. But at, like, 40, 50, or even 30, it's like, okay, it's kind of strange. Like, because people just don't talk to each other anymore.
Yeah, that's
So if you can
very
start
true.
them at a younger age, people are more willing to talk to that child and really help them through that. And to me, having being good at conversations is actually the most beneficial thing. Like, yeah, of course, I talk about speaking on stage and helping people with that. But if you can't have a good conversation, which is most of what we do every day, it doesn't matter how polished you are on stage. You're not going to go far in life. So getting better at conversations is really important. So having conversations with strangers, trying to just have conversations at the dinner table, like we talked about earlier, having conversations when you go out with family, wherever you can, and really just pushing your kids to do that. Ordering from the menu, order their own food, saying the prayer, like you mentioned earlier, just trying to find little opportunities to get them to do that. I had a buddy that I went to college with. He said when he was in high school, I don't know how true it was, but he said that his dad on Friday nights, they'd go out, and he's like, if you don't have a date Friday night, you either got to find your own food. He's like, I'm not paying for your meal, so you got to find your own food or go without. And he was a very outgoing guy. And I would say it was probably to that and some other things as well. Like, hey, I want to be able to eat, so I just got to talk to a girl and bring her to dinner.
Well, I think
So,
that There's something important. What you were saying too is the fact that I think sometimes we as parents and the kids, and it's our responsibility, but we kind of think like, oh, they're innately an introvert. I'm not going to push them. I'm not going to make it uncomfortable. I'm not going to make them sad or depressed by pushing them. But we also have this responsibility to kind of, like you say, be a coach and ask like, do you want to be like this? Would you want to have this skill, or what are these things that you want? So if you want to play basketball and you don't play basketball, you never learned or whatever, and now you want to play basketball, or you want to be like that person who plays basketball, you go to basketball camp. It's the same thing with speaking, I suppose. If somebody
Yeah.
says, I want to be like that popular person who talks all the time, well, we can get you there. We can, there are things you can do, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, thinking about that environment and giving more context than just what's in your mind. And
Right,
and I'll
right.
give it a
Or
silly
the
example.
judgment. Yeah. Sometimes we
Yeah, and I'll
judge.
give you a silly example here, but we had this ant infestation at the house one time, and we've got dog food there in the breakfast nook, which is where like the bowl is where our dog eats. Then we've got the dog food container, which is the container full of food that's in our laundry room. Well, I had told my wife about, oh, there's ants by the dog food. And
Hmm.
that's all I said. Well, there's dog food in two locations, but in my mind, I knew I was talking about the dog food in the laundry room. And then
Right.
she came back. She said, "Oh my gosh, there's ants in the dog food in the laundry room as well." And I was like, "That's what I said," but I really didn't say that because in my mind, I knew that context, and I just said, "Oh, it's by the dog food." She should have known I meant in the laundry room, the
Right, right.
container. I could have said laundry room. I could have said container. I could
There
have
you go.
said anything to give just a little bit more
Context.
context, one or two words to give that much more context, so we wouldn't have a conversation later and be like, well, that's what I said. And of course, I wasn't like, you're an idiot. But there's situations like that in the corporate world where, like, oh my gosh, this idiot. But really, you're the idiot because you didn't give the full context.
Yeah.
And so, simple things like that, just keeping in mind that you have the information here, but the person you're speaking with doesn't have all that. And learning how to articulate just a little bit more detail will really help you with conversations. Now, you don't need to go down and be like, well, yeah, well, you know where the dog food's at over in the laundry room. Like, you'll be, that
Patronizing. Yeah.
silly about it, but giving just a few more words, giving some context to what you're talking about will really help somebody be able to clue in. And so having these conversations like that, and that's why I say having more conversations, because you learn how to start articulating your thoughts better through conversations, through podcasts like this. I think podcasts are another great way. I love telling people to get on their phone. Not suggesting that for kids, but I say get on the phone and just start speaking about different topics to get better at speaking. But having a podcast conversation like this or a one-on-one conversation is where you're really going to get good at articulating the thoughts in your head and having other people understand that, because you get that immediate feedback versus a Facebook post where you got 2 likes and one of them was your mom. You're not getting feedback of if that was an effective communication or not, or people understood your message. But when you're in a conversation, you're going to know immediately if they understood or not.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to get my kids to both start podcasts because I think it's an excellent way to talk to a lot of different people and have this communication, learn these skills, and also put yourself out there a little bit in the world, which is so important right now.
Yeah, I mean it's huge. I've got a buddy in the manufacturing industry. He's a sales guy, and he's actually been using a podcast to get in front of the executives of these other manufacturing companies. And it's a unique way because it's like, hey, can I talk to you? Can we get
Right.
a coffee together or take you out to lunch or something? Snooze, like,
Best
but
sales
hey, man,
call
would
ever
love,
is
yeah.
to
Yeah,
invite somebody
exactly.
on
But
your
hey, would love
podcast.
to get you on my podcast. We interview different
Yeah.
executives in manufacturing, get their feedback on what they think has made them successful. Everybody loves to talk about themselves. So
Right.
again, that's a power of podcast right there. I mean, us connecting, we connected through this podcast and everything. And there's the podcast is amazing. I love podcasts. I think it's a great tool for sure. And you
Yeah.
could do audio only, you could do video as well. Whatever you want to do to really make it your own thing and talk about whatever you want also,
Yeah.
which is the awesome thing about podcast.
Yeah, sadly, from what my experience, like the schools aren't doing very much in this area of public speaking. And I think if I were in charge, I'd have like at least a semester on just on public speaking alone. I don't know many schools that even do Toastmasters. I didn't do Toastmasters until I was in graduate school, and then I did it in business. But is Toastmasters a thing that's still really used in a lot of places? And do kids do it?
I think it's more of an older
Yeah.
generation. My
Yeah.
experience with Toastmasters, it seemed to be a lot of older people and then
Yeah.
people in corporate world that
Yeah.
was, hey, if you want to move up to management, you need to go to Toastmasters. And they
Well, I
kind of
did it
just
in
went
business
because,
school, so
yeah, yeah, is they
yeah.
kind of had to. But I did take a public speaking class. Ironically, I never thought I'd be a public speaker, but when I was a freshman, and it was very daunting because there was nothing but seniors in there. So here
Mhm.
I am, this freshman, haven't really hit puberty yet, with all these big seniors that have gone through puberty, and they seem so much older than me at the time and everything. So here I am not wanting to speak in the first place. I get forced into this class and now
Right.
I'm in front of seniors. So I would think something kind of like a Toastmasters, if not a Toastmasters, would be so beneficial. And
Yeah.
it is something that we should teach. Finances. There's all sorts of things that I think really should go back into the schools so
Yeah.
people can learn to be able to
Yeah.
think on their own, communicate on their own, be able to function on their own in different aspects. But yeah, I agree. I think we do need something like that back in schools, and it's unfortunate we don't. I think Toastmasters is a great model that could be used.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to have you on because I just think it's such a critical skill for all of us to learn. So you do coaching, you do one-on-one coaching, you do group coaching, you help people prepare for speeches, and you also have a free course that is like public speaking 101, right?
Correct. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
got a free course, speakingsessions.com/speech prep, where you can go there and get that for free. It's got a few videos in there for you to be able to learn some of the basics of public speaking and helping you get better at that, thinking about the kind of the end in mind and a little bit of what we talked about here, but it's more catered towards actually
Adults.
preparing for a presentation, whether
Yeah.
it be
Okay.
boardroom, 10 people, 1,000 people, whatever. But that's what that's catered more towards.
Yeah, very useful. And I saw you've got podcasts. You've got a lot of podcasts that are on specific topics involved with speaking. So if you're interested in this topic, I urge people to check it out. Well, Philip, it's been really fun talking to you about this. I don't know if I did as good a job as a dad as I could have, should have, getting my kids to get involved with this. There are so many things that you could push on your kids. There's only so much time in the day, but I do think it's such a critical skill that we all need to learn to be more effective out there.
I agree. I mean, and dads are they're so important in a child's life. It's amazing. I don't know the statistic. My wife and I had talked about this. It's if the dad is not in the child's life, it's more detrimental for some reason than when the mom is not in the life. And I don't know why that is, but and of course the best way is to have them both in the life and
Yeah.
everything. But for some reason, when the dad's not there, it's more detrimental than when the mom's not there. But so I love that you're doing this podcast and you're really helping dads out. And I just want to encourage all the dads out there. It's tough. We don't get enough credit, but you are doing the right thing. You
Yeah.
are setting that example, and you should be setting that example. And unfortunately, by creating discipline, by creating the example, a lot of times people don't give us that credit, especially as dads, as husbands, as men, until we're on our deathbed. But just know that you are doing the right thing and just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Keep living to the standard that you're trying to hold for your family because you are making that difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, Philip Sessions, thanks again for joining me. I'm Paul Banks with GreatDad.com, and you can check out my coaching offerings, including a course on gratitude and a course on resilience and a lot of other different subjects at GreatDad.com/go. So until next time, stay strong.